With all respects, can we put our palms together and offer Luang Por 3 bows? First bow. Second bow. And so Luang Por has a big screen. If you wish to turn on your video so Luang Por could see you clearly, it's always very welcome. If not, you only see a few pixels. But
Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you.
He's smiling. He can see many of you now. Okay, over to you, Luang Por.
Shall we start with some meditation?
Yes, please, Luang Por.
This is a half-hour meditation. I'll say a few words, but let's enjoy the silence as well. So take a meditative posture. And just check out where you are right now here in this room and how you feel. So establish a sense of presence with the way things are. Let go of thinking and just know how you feel. Refine that by listening to sound. Let the sounds present themselves, become conscious. Let go of thinking. No need to think, just sound, listening. Notice the sounds. Notice the silence of awareness. Awareness is a background of silent consciousness. Foreground, sense experience, feel your hands. Allow the tactile feelings in your hands to become conscious. Let go of thinking. Notice the feelings in the hands. Notice the silence of awareness. Be that silent awareness. Feel the breathing of the body. Allow the breathing to become conscious. Let go of thinking. Notice the changing nature of breath. Notice the unchanging silence of awareness. Be that awareness. So you all have some experience. I'll leave you with that and a grounding, and let's just sit quietly. All right, let's stop there. On that wall, there's some switches with open windows on them. Press all four. Yeah, all four. When you get these windows,
Thank you, Luang Por. We'll now like to request the Dhamma.
Majaloka Tipati Sahampati Katan Jalian Tivaram Ayajata Santi Dasata Paraja Kajadika cease.The Dhammam anukam vajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. Hello everyone. Hope you're good. Tisarna is very peaceful these days. We have a new Dhamma hall which was finished at Katina last year. So before that, we had a building site for 3 years or 2 years. Now it's so beautiful, beautiful, beautiful hall, very peaceful, and there's lots of time for bhavana. So it's a nice year, at least for me. How about you? Yeah, it's all right. Okay. So Dhamma, I need to say something. The context of any meditation is always the deeper commitment we have to lifestyles which are embedded in the ideas of nonviolence, of not harming beings, the ideas of speech which is in concord, speech which is truthful, actions which are not manipulative or harmful to the planet, to ourselves, a sense of respect for our own bodies, not using our own bodies just for sense pleasure or obsessive work or whatever it might be, respecting our bodies, respecting what we put into our bodies. So a sense of lifestyles that are kind, considerate, also our responsibilities to our family, our responsibility to our credit cards, that we don't fall into debt and then be burdened by obsessive thoughts about all of that. And these are all very important, because if the worldly dhammas are out of whack or not paid attention to, then they just obsess the mind. You have no chance for deeper spiritual work. So in Islam, I think they say, trust in Allah and tie your camel. So tying your camel is making sure that your expenses are less than your income, etc., etc. And I know that's a commonplace thing, but sometimes people, like if I meet people who haven't been careful, then that lack of care or lack of frugality or lack of long-range consideration overwhelms them. The spiritual life gets isn't really available because they're so caught up with things. Having said that, some people have very great misfortune, and they just have to deal with the very great misfortune. So our duty as Buddhists is to try to share our good fortune with those who have less fortune, just to share something, some kind words, some food, some money, some resources, so that we offer to society something which is helpful to those who don't have the good chances that we have. We can only do a little bit, but a little bit can be a lot. And I think the heart of the social, our social engagement is gratitude and generosity, because gratitude is a very spiritual quality. Because in gratitude there's no complaining, there's no wanting more and more. There's this just this simple gratitude for the goodness one has. And gratitude as a reflection or consideration is not the same as gratitude as a demand. So if someone says to me, children in Gaza are starving, you should be grateful for the food you have. That's not really a reflection on gratitude. It's a kind of, you should be something that you're not. Whereas if I see a picture of a starving child in Gaza, and I look at that with a kind of compassionate heart, then when I'm walking around the monastery, any sense of complaining is just, it's just not on. It's just not on, Viradhammo. Stop being silly. And that's, and so the gratitude can come up and serve the heart. And then generosity, that sense that I do have a little bit more. I can share. It's not just about me and mine. And these are very, very important parts of the spiritual life to constantly be remembering, cultivating. And I find that with the Kalyanamita, the brothers and sisters in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and all over the world, there is a tremendous amount of goodness that I'm fortunate enough to relate with. I think sometimes, like when I was living in London, I would go out. We rarely went out in the evening. When we were in Hampstead Vihara, we'd go out to a park in the mornings, but sometimes we'd go out in the evening, and then I'd meet someone who's drunk. And I don't see drunk people very often. And they would come up to us and be obnoxiously religious and really smell of alcohol. And I thought, wow, how ignorance can manifest in human consciousness, and how we can destroy our barami and our goodness. There's always the shock, because I live in very sober societies, as you know. So our lifestyles, right speech, right action, 5 precepts, being responsible in economic terms, taking care of our families, our parents. These define our life as we live it socially, and many other things, of course. Any Russell? Is he doing the lawns? Oh, great. You'll hear a lawnmower in the back. Anyway, I hear it. If we have those things in place, and we have the good fortune to have some spare time, to have good health, to have good friendships and all the rest of it, then of course we have a chance to contemplate a spiritual life, our inner life. And obviously for me, I became a monk. Because of that, I was very interested in how the mind worked, and also I was very concerned about why I suffered. He stopped. Sorry, I'm distracted a bit. So I'm not suffering, I'm just distracted. So coming into the monastery, then I had the good fortune to have resources given to me, and my teacher and lay people said, well, if you're interested in the mind, please do this work, and maybe you'll be able to share some of it later. So now I get a chance to share a few years later. I was thinking of the word heart this past week, and how many different ways that word is used in English culture. So obviously there's the heart, which is the pumping organ, pumping blood. And then sometimes we talk about the heart, the emotional heart. Sometimes heart is the core of something, the kind of center. And I think one of the core hearts of spiritual life, I think, is silence and stillness. Not the silence of a quiet forest or a lawnmower that's now quiet. Not that silence, but rather the silence of no thought. And the stillness that allows us to notice. Now, these are very difficult things to to touch and realize, because the thinking mind is so rampantly active, and it's been doing that for a long time, and so it's very, very habitual. And of course, that's one of the questions that people ask in meditation. How can I make my mind a bit more quiet? I'm not asking for enlightenment, but how about just a bit more quietness? And it's quite common, I find. People will think that meditation is getting rid of thought. So they'll focus on an object of meditation and then try to get rid of thinking by focusing on something else. And those of us who've been doing this for a while, that's totally unsuccessful, because it's based on desire. It's not based on the desire to get rid of. And if you reflect back on the Four Noble Truths, it's about the abandonment of desire. There's the letting go of desire. And yet there is that rabid thinking mind, the mind which just runs to worry, or runs to resentment, or picks up some memory and runs with that. This kind of constant, what I call preoccupation. Well, that's one of the ways I like to think about attachment, is the preoccupation of our attention on some aspect of our lives. And that preoccupation obviously precludes any chance of silence, any chance of stillness, because that's movement, and that's intoxication or consuming or being caught up with. So how to remember the mind which is not preoccupied? It's one way to look at it. Or another way to think about it, awareness unfurnished, not furnished with judgments and all the rest of it that we get caught up into. So when you look at preoccupation and the thinking patterns that you are preoccupied with, that we are preoccupied with, as I always say, if you really observe, you'll see that the patterns that you get caught up into are actually maybe only a few. Worry, fantasy, resentment, whatever it might be, self-disparagement. And one of the ideas I've been presenting here is that these habitual thought patterns that we tend to get preoccupied with, they have hooks in them. And one of the questions I ask people, what's the hook? What's the hook of your preoccupied mind? Well, how does that work? Now, a good question placed well into the contemplative's mind is a question which awakens. A bad question is one that just takes you to more thinking and more analysis and more judgment. But if you're really attentive to your inner world, you're going to be concerned about the rapid nature of thinking, the endless way the mind creates thought. And then how to work with that, how to deal with that? Well, one of the ways is to do anapanasati, or whatever meditation technique you use. But in everyday life, one of the things you need to do is somehow awaken to the patterning of the mind and see, what's the hook? What is the hook that takes you into thought? Now, if you can set that question up, what's the hook? You'll see that the hook is always some sense of conceit. The conceit, I am this, I am that, you shouldn't be that way. The conceit, I am. And if you keep with that question, what's the hook? What's the hook? You start to see the patterns as objects, and you are not the patterns. You are the awareness which knows the patterns. If you keep with it, if you keep asking, what's the hook? Now, if you just go into analysis, well, the hook is that I think too much, and my mother gave me a rough time, and I'm running out of money. That's not awareness, that's more thinking. But just as a way of awakening, a question is excellent. A question is much better than analysis. So you're meditating or you're walking around or whatever you're doing, you start to ask that, what's the hook? And as you notice, you begin to, an intuition begins to build that you are not that thinking mind, that you are the awareness that knows that. Not as a kind of philosophical conclusion, but as a real-time change of perspective. It's kind of like the snake in the rope. You know, the mistake that the deluded person sees the rope as a snake and gets shocked and frightened. And it's the same way with the narratives of ego and thought that run through our minds. They seem very real, and they're certainly there, but that identity with them is not necessary because they are objects. Very hard to know them as objects because we quickly become the subject of the narrative. So we ask a question. What's the hook? What's the hook? And we keep observing, And after a while, it becomes apparent that, yeah, that's just stuff. That's just the foreground. But the background knew that. The background could see that. Awareness could see that. And you become more and more interested in turning the mind inwards, away from thought to the silence of the mind, to no thought, to stillness. This kind of turning of the mind, become interested, not because you're getting rid of thought, but I would say, but because there is an alternative. There is an alternative to the foreground, of which is the five khandhas or the six ayatanas or the mind-body experience, however you want to name it in whatever form you like, or just stuff, if you want to make it really simple. But there is an alternative. There is an alternative to thought and emotion and feeling and taste and all of that. And that's the silence of awareness. Now, we don't usually notice awareness because we're so caught up, preoccupied with the objects. So this kind of a question then starts to emphasize awareness rather than our aversion to the thinking or our fascination with the thinking. What's the hook? What's the hook? And if you really watch, oh yeah, there it is. And then you start to see that that question is a question that takes you to silence. The silence of knowing, not the silence of just knowing, oh, that's a thought. And you start to expand that. And then the language of contemplation becomes more like you start to say to yourself, more silence. Not get rid of thought. No, more silence. So your mind starts to make a problem about something, worry about kids, do something, and you as a kind of turning, you say to yourself, more silence. You turn inwards. You turn inwards to the background. You start to contemplate stillness. Now, when you enter into meditation, like say anapanasati, with a sense of that quietness, that silence, and then use the breath to be that aware silence, then it works quite well. But if you enter into meditation using the breath, for instance, and then when thoughts come up, you just try to suppress the thoughts with the breath and try even harder, it won't work. It won't work. Even if you do that for a while, your thoughts will explode as soon as you stop meditating. So you have to awaken. You have to constantly awaken to the way things are, because in the awakening of the mind, there is silence. Think about when you're like just this meditation, meditated for half an hour. How many thoughts were preoccupying your attention? Probably more than 6, maybe 7. Okay, so, but somewhere in that thinking, something interrupted that thinking, right? You noticed that you were thinking. And in the interruption of thinking, there is no thought. Obviously, there's no thought. And what one is encouraged to do constantly is to celebrate the interruption of thought. and the place of no thought, the presence of no thought. And by celebrate, I mean you say, oh, great, I'm back. Rather than, oh, God, I'm thinking too much. Why am I thinking so much? How can I? That's just more thinking. So you start with little gaps. You start to appreciate the space between a thought. When thought ends, you start to really notice when thought ends. You actually name it. Oh, that just ended. Ajahn Viradhammo uses it's like this. When he says it's like this, what's after the statement is silence. If you use the statement seriously, it's like this. And you're listening, you're receptive, you know. And it doesn't matter what your experience is, good, bad, or indifferent. So you start to use language now, language to awaken the mind, to sustain the awakened mind, and to begin to abandon all the narratives and identities that thought are constantly creating through habit into consciousness, preoccupation. Silence, stillness are they're always there, but thoughts are not always there. Isn't like the silence of awareness or knowing, it's always there. Why don't we turn to it? Well, because of craving, right? We want, we don't want. So the question, what's the hook, is not a wanting question. It's not I want to get rid of my thinking. It's an observing question. What's the hook? And then wait and observe. And then get lost again. And then what's the hook? And then wait. So a lot of it is around waiting after the question, not answering it. So this isn't meant for analysis. This is meant for awakening. When Luang Por says it's like this. Well, of course, how else could it be? But when it's like this, can you then be silent after that question, listen, receive, know, and train in that, train in that, train in that, train in that. It takes a lot of vigor, but it's not the vigor of, lifting 100-pound weights. It's a rigor which is imbued with refinement. You'll be quite refined in your attention to notice this. It's imbued with an interest in silence. It's imbued with curiosity and then determination. Because if our attention is constantly preoccupied with the khandhas, with the foreground, with thoughts, then we cannot realize the deep possibility of peace that we have. Because we're right, the mind's going outside. And turning the mind to the mind is a very refined task. Very few people would even understand what I'm talking about. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. The mind knowing the mind. What is that? Awareness knowing awareness. That's a very strange way to talk. So when you live your life, and as you live your life, and you start to turn attention to your inner world, be curious about how self-narratives manifest and how your sense of self-identity gets recreated through thought. But that's not who you are. And then take one of those narratives and think it through deliberately. If you're resentful of someone who you argued with at work, and you have this recurring resentful thought about being hurt by them, then notice it. What's the hook? And then the hook is self-identity, me and that person. And then take that thought and think, I'm never going to forgive them. Say the thought, but then stop and stop. There's no thought. I hate them. And then stop, feel that, know it. And there's the end of the thought. Or I am a terrible meditator. My mind will not stop thinking. Then stop. There's the end of thought. So these are exercises that are, they're not rocket science. You don't have to get a PhD in nuclear physics to do it, but you have to do it. And they're boring. Very, very boring. It's not, you know. But the result of that work is like, it is craft. That's why I always say it's the craft of the heart. The craft of the heart of our practice is silence. I'm presently trying to put a warp on my loom. And I had a disastrous day yesterday. I'm trying to figure out a new way. It's called sectional warping, of putting a long warp on so I can do 8 rugs without changing the warp. And I have 150 ends of warp fiber that will be, each end will be 24 yards long. And then that will make a total length of 3,600 yards of string. Now that can be spaghetti junction if I'm not careful. And yesterday I was doing a test piece and it was spaghetti junction. Oh, it's just a disaster. So I was watching disasters like this, failures like this. So I wasn't really getting that frustrated, but I was observing, okay, how could I do this differently? So then today, okay, then, you know, how the mind deals with problems, it somehow solves them. So this morning I had some solutions. So I got up there this afternoon, okay, and it was a bit better. I think I have a way to do it. And that's awareness, isn't it? Awareness observes over time with this. These are the causes and conditions for peace. And these are the causes and conditions for confusion. That's the way awareness works. So trust in awareness. Trust in awareness. But do we trust in awareness or do we trust in thinking? Quite often, we trust in thinking. You know, like a thought comes up, and rather than being aware of the mood of the mind, the structure and repeated patterning of the mind, we just trust in thinking and go to the next thought. Into the next thought, into the next thought. That's trusting in thought. Trusting in sankharas, not that thought is wrong. I had to think to try to figure out how I could do the warp. Yeah, but thinking I'm really concerned with is the narrative thinking of ego, self. And that, don't trust that. I mean, that's a liar. I don't know about you, but the lies that my thinking egotistical mind have told me and the disasters it's led me to, just can't trust it. Don't trust it. So narrative thought is different than planning thought. Ego thought is different, but you can know it. And so what you do in contemplating your inner world, you begin to really listen. It's an inner listening. What's it saying? And where's the hook? How does the sense of self get created? By observing. And if you observe and you observe and you observe, then that observation becomes your home ground. And then the attachment and seeming reality of the narratives of ego and self, they don't fool you. They're there, they come and they go, but they don't fool you. That's not your real home. If you're going to identify with anything, identify with awareness. Don't identify with your thinking mind. That's a disaster. It really is. So to use right thinking is not ego thinking. So if I'm meditating, to use right thought, like a question, what's the hook? Or be patient, or slowly, slowly. These are good words, aren't they? They're good suggestions, but they're not. They're not coming from desire or ego. We're not trying to become anything. We're trying to awaken. So the awakened mind is noticed with a question. What's it like now? Or with a statement. It's like this. And then right after the statement, there's the silence. Trust in that. Trust in that. See what happens. And you'll see it's difficult. It's difficult to do. But to me, the heart of the spiritual life is silence, is stillness. And more stillness, more silence, I think is a good mantra, rather than more thought and more distraction and more consuming. More thought, more more doings. This isn't a doing, this is an awakening and remembering. Awareness is like the sky. The sky is always there. And the khandhas are the stuff that you get caught up into looking at. And suddenly you look up, there's the sky. It's awareness, it's always there, always available, always silent, always still. But we don't notice the awareness, we notice the objects. And then we get caught up in our habitual patterns. So awakening to that it's arduous work. Not many people really are up for it. But if you're up for it, it's interesting work. All right, that's my half hour. I'll leave that for your reflection.
Andamayam Dhammakataya Sadhu Karanda Dhamma Singh Sadhu 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 Anmodam.
Any questions?
Thank you so much, Luang Por. We'd like to now open the floor for questions from anyone here in this Zoom room. If you have a question, please click on the raise hand button, which you can find under the reactions button. Anyone's got a question or comment? Oh, okay, Malika. Malika, can you, yes, please, go ahead.
Morning, Ajahn.
Hi, Malika.
Hi, how are you? Good
I'm
to see
good,
you.
thanks. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Bante, I was talking to Ajahn Joe, Bante Joe, and he said that we are lucky to have the same teacher. I told him you taught me meditation. And he said, oh, we are lucky that we have the same teacher. Yeah, I talked to him now.
Okay, thank you. You've muted yourself.
I've introduced my friend Dr. Sam, who donated to your monastery. So he's joined first time on Zoom.
Lovely. Okay.
He's
Welcome wherever you are in this
he's
mass
in
of pictures.
name is his name comes as Samsung something.
Oh, okay.
And I have a little question on gratitude, Ajahn.
Right.
How can generosity be used as a form of gratitude? Now, we love to pay gratitude to our teachers. And so how can you just gratitude to Zoom, gratitude to Beta, all these people for just doing
Well,
all
first
these
of all,
special...
their states of mind. That's most important. Gratitude is a way of being, isn't it? And then generosity is a way of sharing. So that's foremost, is that your mind has a sense of, or can return to a sense of gratitude, so it doesn't always crave more and more. And then also there is that yearning to share what you have. And then circumstances come, you can say thank you, you can offer something. It doesn't really matter how you do it. It's the state of mind that's most important. And then you have traditional ways of expressing, like writing a letter or just practicing, dedicating your practice to the people who have been. That's a really nice one to do. You have,
Yes.
like you say, okay, I had this session, it was helpful. I'll dedicate my practice to all the good people here, or to Bita, or those kinds of. So you're always just cultivating a better mind, a more beautiful mind, and that manifests in the world in lovely ways. It takes care of itself, really. So we take care of the mind, and then the manifestations are depending on circumstances.
Ajahn, so is there metta in it? So
Well, all of them are part of the open. They're all open heart. You can chop it up like like you chop a body up, but it's all about the open heart. It's about metta. It's about mudita. It's about karuna. It's about generosity. It's about kindness. They're all really one thing, of the heart not being caught in egotism and being open to sharing and doing. So we chop it all up into these different ways, but that's the analytical part. But the heart is one. The analytical part, because that's how language works. That's how scholars like to chop it up. But I personally just feel when the heart's open, then it responds. It responds in a beautiful way. When the heart's closed and it's dark, then that needs to be looked at and considered. So just like keep it simple that way. If you chop it all up, then you get caught up into thinking rather than the open heart. You start to think, is that kindness or is that compassion? And is that generous? Then you're not, you're just caught in thought. So one of the problems with too much study is too much thought. And we constantly, if you get too ingrained in study, then you end up just comparing experience to some scriptural norm. And then you're actually not aware anymore. So you're constantly thinking, analyzing, and judging and comparing, which is just still thought. That will not take you to silence. Whereas the open heart will take you to silence if you just allow it to be open. And that's actually in that vein, it's very good to learn to try to bring attention into the heart center away from the obsessive thinking mind. That's a very, very good movement, but that's not an intellectual movement. That's a visceral movement. So be careful of intellect. It's limited, it's good, but it's very limited in that it cannot take you to silence. A thought cannot put an end to thought. So how to use right thinking? So in terms of my own training, we were talking about that this morning, Ajahn Chah asked me to stop reading for 5 years. He didn't give me the text. He didn't say, okay, now you study this text and that text. He said, you've got too much thinking in your mind. Just be quiet and try to meditate. And insight will come. Insight will come. And what I found is I'm not a great studier. I studied a lot early on, but what I found, I had enough material, Four Noble Truths and some basics that I could work with for a lifetime. And then as I worked with them, they became alive in little ways. So I found that a constant study with more text and more information and more text and more information actually was counterproductive because it didn't allow me to actually use those concepts and ideas which I already had in place, and they were sufficient. So there is a usefulness in study, but also there's a danger. Vice versa, there's also a danger in meditation without any form and structure in intellectual guardrails. Any kind of understanding of what the project is about, any kind of vision of what the project is about. So the Four Noble Truths are excellent intellectual material from which we can derive a lot of contemplative material. Desire, the 3 kinds of desire is a lot of work there, which you don't have to read about. You have to look in your heart. So be careful of too much dissecting and that. I think it can be counterproductive. Okay?
Yeah,
Shall we
Ajahn
move
Chah
on to
said
someone else?
Katan, yeah, Chah said Katanyu Katavedi, but
Gratitude and then giving back from the gratitude.
yeah, because it's a very
Okay,
rare
Malika,
thing
nice.
in the world. Yeah.
Nice to
Thank you,
connect.
Ajahn.
Okay.
Thank you, Malika.
Marissa, John.
John, Marissa and John, are you able to unmute yourself?
I'm mute.
Unmute. Marissa,
Unmute your computer. The little red icon. Get rid of the little red icon. Take your mouse over to the icon.
Oh.
Throw your mouse at the computer.
Yeah.
Well, you work on it. Maybe someone else. Oh, there you go. You're in.
Unmuted finally.
There you go. Well done.
2 functioning
How are
Ajahn
you?
button. Good, Ajahn. How are you?
I'm very good. Nice to see you.
Wonderful to see you too. Timely discussion about gratitude and it's just a lot of feeling of overwhelm with the amount of need that is out there, and it's hard to decide what to do sometimes, and sometimes it's kind of spontaneous, but we're just, inundated with request. And especially in light of what's going on, a lot of things have been cut off for people. So it's, it's been kind of a struggle to, not, go overboard and then, not have anything for us. And
Yes.
yeah, it's complicated.
Well, John, I think you have to be careful to not get caught in the idea that you can fix things or that it's your responsibility to fix. Although it's an absurd idea that you can fix all poverty and so on, still, when you get the request, there is that sense, I should help, I should fix something. And that's still a mood of the mind. I am someone who needs to do something. And so that needs to, like, this is a different kind of example, I suppose, but when I first started to, when I was a monk in Chithurst, there weren't any senior monks. I was junior, but I was senior junior. And so then people would come and ask questions. And I was a young monk, but I was the guy. Sometimes, usually it was Luang Por, but if he was away, it was me or Anando, Ajahn Sucitto. So I'd be answering someone's question and they'd have some really, really poignant suffering in their family or with their health. And I got really stressed out because I thought I had to give them an answer to fix their problem. And then Luang Por, he taught me, he said, no. You can't fix it. You can only listen. You can only listen and then allow from the listening some response to take place. So I was caught in desire. I was caught in the desire for them not to suffer. Right? And I had the same with my mom, taking care of her. I didn't want her to suffer. And at 97, she died at 97, but she had osteoporosis and all kinds of stuff. So she had her physical karma that she had to live. And I realized that's her karma. And I have my karma. I can do my best I can. So that's a very real thing. When you have compassion, you really want to help everyone. And so there's a desire there. So at least that's my perception of it. So look at the desire not to have the world this way and the desire to have the world another way. And say, yeah, but the world is like this. There are impossible problems. And there are these things that take place and it's like this. And I think that takes you to a kind of realistic sense of compassion. If you go to the narrative, then of course it's just thought. And then I think from that place where you have a sense of compassionate equanimity, you do good things. You do, but also you got to take care of Marissa and yourself, and those are very important things. So, and you got to have an ice cream cone sometime too. It's all kind of significant. So if you keep with the Four Noble Truths, I think, and you keep that as your central contemplative vehicle, then whenever you get these moral confusions or those kinds of things, just go back to the Four Noble Truths. What is it that I want that I don't have? And what do I have that I don't want? Where's the wanting now? So then you're stepping back from the narrative and you're looking at stream of consciousness. You're looking at the five khandhas. So, in Buddhism, we always have these two ways of operating. We operate in the world and we witness the world. When we operate in the world, we practice morality, generosity, all those good things. When we are witnessing the world, we practice anicca, dukkha, anatta. We witness change. So when you have suffering, you're going back to the witnessing part. When you're confused to something, when you have a toothache, you go back to the worldly part. You go to the dentist, you get that sorted out. But these existential moral kind of dilemmas that we all face, you have to step back and say, oh, suffering is like this, but not the narrative suffering. It's the experiential, existential, whatever you're experiencing right now. Oh, this is the contraction, or this is whatever it is. You start to observe that. And those two ways of working with Buddhism are very important to constantly remember. Because the Four Noble Truths, remember, it's not I am suffering, there is suffering. It's the statement, right? We keep remembering that. And that's the statement of awareness. Whereas I am suffering is the statement of going to the dentist, right? Or the statement of attachment. So just step back and say, wow, what is it? What is this feeling I have? And just observe and see what comes up from that.
It's, you know,
Makes
it's,
sense?
it does, but you know, for me, it doesn't come from thinking. It really comes from, and maybe it's just from my background of having experienced poverty and things like that. That, you know, just a real strong, and it is a desire, but it feels like it's from the heart and it's compassion, and you know, just trying to, you know, yeah, it's
Well, perhaps it's the statement that the world is like this. That it's not, which isn't a fatalistic statement, but that there is poverty, that there is injustice. It's like this. And then that sense of hurt, you allow that to be there. And that's, I think, where equanimity and compassion become conjoined. You have the compassion, but you also, yeah, but the world is like this. There is war. We don't want it. And there is corruption and all that is, and it's like this. So you're coming back to an acceptance, but not a condolence. You still do your utmost, whatever you can. So that might be an interesting one. When you feel that in your heart, say, yeah, but life is like this. There is injustice. It is unfair. But you have a good heart, so that's where you have a moral dilemma. You're a kind person, so that's where it comes from.
the
But
blessing.
you know, remember, you are allowed an ice cream every now and then.
I had one today. Thank you, Ajahn.
All right, there you go. Okay.
Are there any other questions from anyone here? Any final questions? No? License question. Luang Por, if I may be allowed to read it out.
Sure.
License says, I recently find myself overwhelmed with the amount of time, effort, and resources in sutta study and Dhamma learnings. So much so, I had to take a deliberate break and just let things. Is this normal, Luang Por?
Yeah, I don't know how people listen to so many of these Dhamma talks. It amazes me. Like I could, if I do one a month, it's a big deal for me. Like Ajahn Chah, right? You'd get a talk from him once a fortnight, and the rest would be like, come on, you guys, shape up. So like I'm amazed that like sometimes people are like watch 2 Dhamma talks a day. I think, really? You can do that? I don't quite get how you can process anything. If I take it, you know, if I listen to Luang Por Sumedho, I love his talks. But then I kind of keep it for a month and work with it and contemplate it rather than keep putting pennies in the bank all the time. So like if I read like the Four Noble Truths, like I said to folk, remember that one time I said, why don't you contemplate resistance for 1 year, right? Which is vibhava tanha. That's one word in the texts, but work on it for a year and you get profound results. But if you listen to a talk and then you hear vibhava tanha and then you hear the 7 of this and the 8 of that and the 9 of that, the 26 of this and 48 of that, how can you? I don't see how you can compute it. You might be inspired. Okay, you might be inspired, but are you a contemplative? Or are you just getting a nice Dharma hit? So you want to be careful of Dharma becoming a kind of entertainment, right? You just kind of, oh, there's another one. And then also just the commodification through the internet, of creating this beautiful this and beautiful that. And then it becomes somewhat sensual. Nothing like a good, boring talk. At least I like, you're kind of, the mosquitoes are biting and you don't understand the language and you're just sitting there for 2 or 3 hours. And that was a good Dhamma talk because you had to look at your mind. You had to be. So the contemplative life is not a life of more and more information or more and more stimulation. It's like taking some ideas and then really working with them. Not that I mean, it's great to listen to Dhamma and like go for it. I'm not saying, but be careful not to be careful to take some ideas and then work with them for some period of time. I think that's very, very important.
But what a beautiful way of summarizing today's session, Luang Por, reminding us to just, be there, be in the present. I think for me, what you just said about what is the hook really reminds me about enjoying watching drip coffee. But
Okay.
yeah, watching drip coffee in my mind. And it's just that drip and just be present with that whole awareness and the presence of.
You'll have to give a desana on that next time. I'll give you my platform and you can do drip coffee.
So that's all the time that we have today, and we're very thankful for Luang Por giving us the last 90 minutes. In closing, may we please request Luang Por to guide us in the verses of sharing and aspiration, please, Luang Por.
Got it on the screen. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice and through this act of sharing. May all cravings and attachments quickly cease and all harmful states of mind until I realize Nibbana in every kind of birth. May I have an upright mind with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble Lord. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. Okay, everyone. See you next time.
Before you go, Luang Por, allow us to bid you farewell and take leave by chanting the Arahant, please, brothers and sisters. Arahant Sama Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Swagato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Suparipano Bhagavato Sawaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.
Hey, everyone. Namaste.
Thank
Be
you, Long.
well.
See you. Bye-bye.
Stay happy.